Still got just 2 minutes, so if you want to keep chatting amongst yourselves, because we want to start right on 7:30, so that's when it was advertised for. 1 minute to go. The post office clock, we'll take that as 7:30. So welcome everybody. I'll declare the meeting open, the annual general meeting of the City of Hobart. I'd like to advise everyone present that the audio of this meeting will be recorded, and it's also being live streamed via the City of Hobart YouTube channel. It gives me great pleasure to open this and welcome you all to our meeting. And in the spirit of reconciliation, I would like to acknowledge the Muanina people as the traditional owners of the land upon which we are meeting tonight. As a city, we'd like to acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community who have survived invasion and dispossession and continue to maintain their identity, culture and Indigenous rights. My fellow elected members, General Manager Nick Heath, staff and community members, thank you for attending tonight's meeting and for taking an interest in the activities of your council. I would like to acknowledge the presence of the Deputy Lord Mayor, Councillor Helen Burnett, Alderman Marty Zuko, Alderman Jeff Briscoe, Alderman Dr Peter Sexton is an apology, Alderman Damon Thomas, Councillor Bill Harvey, Alderman Simon Barakis, Councillor Mike Dutter, Councillor Jax Ewan, is also an apology, I'm sorry, Councillor Zelinda Sherlock and Councillor Will Coates. There are a number of apologies from invited guests for tonight, and these will be listed in the minutes of tonight's meeting. Are there any further apologies for tonight's meeting that anyone in the audience would like to register? There being none, we will move on. So the minutes of the 2019 annual general meeting conducted on the 2nd of December 2019. They are, I think you all have a copy of them, and I'd invite someone to move a motion that the minutes are a true and accurate record of the meeting. Moved by Deputy Lord Mayor, seconded by Councillor Harvey. I'll put that motion that the minutes be accepted. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Carried unanimously. So the meeting procedures associated with the conduct of the annual general meeting are attached to your agenda. The council is required to conduct an annual general meeting annually as part of this meeting, the council is required to adopt its annual report outlining its financial performance and the outcomes of the council for the year in review. The proceedings for this evening will entail a short address from myself, which will outline the achievements and activities of the City of Hobart in the 2019-2020 financial year, and after which there's an opportunity provided for you to ask any questions or motions related to that. So, 2019-20 was one of exceptional circumstances and very challenging times. I think you'll all agree that the last 6 months of the reporting year has been a time of great uncertainty for the city and for everyone in the community. Despite this, Council was able to make some good progress towards achieving some major actions and initiatives set out in our annual plan, 2019-20. Like so many in our community, this organisation was financially impacted by the COVID-19 global pandemic. And some of the initiatives, programs and projects that we had planned were either cancelled or postponed. In many cases, funding was redirected to provide assistance packages and community grants to help the community get through the pandemic period. While COVID-19 saw us in uncharted waters and facing devastating impacts, there was a commitment from Council to be there for its community. We developed a suite of measures to support our community through the economic and social impacts of the pandemic. These included rent relief for tenants of city-owned buildings, waiving some fees for businesses, extension of the Council's hardship policy to include rate remissions and rate postponements, quick response grant programs to support businesses, creative industries and activities that built capacity and strength and resilience in the Hobart community. This community support package cost $3.5 million and was money well spent. It was very much appreciated by many people in the city experiencing hardship. The significant downturn in income and the impacts to our services saw the pandemic have a direct and very significant result on our 2019-20 operating result. The Council ended the 2019-20 year in a deficit position of $7.12 million. This deficit was caused by COVID-19 and the income that was lost in rates, in parking revenue, in rents for council-owned properties, in aquatic centre fees and Salamanca market fees, just to name a few, as well as accounting for depreciation and asset write-offs. Also impacting this result is the continued costs of the May 2018 flood event, an event that is estimated to have caused the city $16 million in damage. And we're still finalising claims for insurance and seeking funding through the Australian Government's National Disaster Relief and Recovery Arrangement. But despite this, there will still be a multi-million-dollar gap that the city will need to absorb. This event and the financial impact is a sobering reminder about the increasing impact that extreme events and climate change can have on the city's finances. Pre-COVID, we worked hard to progress Year 4 of our Capital Works program, with some of the more significant projects completed, including the Rose Garden Bridge, which is an all-abilities bridge connecting the city centre with the Queen's Domain, and it enhances our pedestrian and cycling network. Works to refurbish the Salamanca precinct to connect Morrison Street waterfront area to Salamanca Place, they continued. All works at the Ferntree visitor node, including new bus shelter, public toilets, barbecue, shelter facilities and roadworks from the Fernglade car park and a new footpath. This project was supported by $800,000 in Australian government funding. There was also replacement toilets at Swan Street, North Hobart, which now has an accessible toilet with parenting facilities and 2 ambulant toilets. There was the internal refurbishment of toilets at the Hobart Central car park, the redevelopment of the new South Hobart Community Centre with a multi-purpose community space offering new opportunity for community gatherings. It also has a lovely new outdoor undercover area that integrates the centre with the park much better than the old one did. This was a $620,000 project and it received $200,000 in funding from the Tasmanian Community Fund, as well as a contribution from the South Hobart Progress Association of $5,000. We endorsed several strategies and programs that will make a positive impact in our community in this year. These strategies and programs include the Capital City Strategic Plan, which is a 10-year plan taking us from 2019 to 2029, our Aboriginal Commitment and Action Plan, which is a 2-year program, 2020 to 2022, detailing the Council's commitment to supporting the city's Aboriginal people and their heritage, the Connected Hobart Smart City Action Plan to guide the implementation of smart technologies and initiatives in the city across the next decade, Protecting Our Wild Heart, which is an action plan for Hobart's very significant bushland that outlines Hobart's rich biodiversity and our plans for protecting our bushland, ecosystems, native plants and native animals. And finally, Resilient Hobart in response to COVID, a way of helping Hobart communities respond to the pandemic. On issues of community importance, the Council agreed to a collaborative planning process with the state government to prepare a Central Hobart Precincts Plan. This plan will address building height limits as well as current and future population, social, environmental and economic trends, traffic, housing supply and other issues of significance to the 64 blocks in the city centre. During the year, the baseline report and the economic study were completed. However, COVID-19 disrupted the community engagement that was planned for this Central Hobart Precincts Plan, and this put it on hold for further review of the economic impacts, and we will be recommencing community engagement soon. We continued our war on waste by becoming the first Australian city to introduce a bylaw to reduce single-use plastics at takeaway food retailers in Hobart. We also launched a new food, organics and garden FOGO collection service, the first of its kind in southern Tasmania. And that will see 3,200 tonnes of household waste diverted from landfill each year. The city also worked with TAFE to expand a recycling service for difficult to recycle items. And the Council also continued its action on homelessness by forming the Greater Hobart Homelessness Alliance. The group comprises 4 Greater Hobart councils and the Huon and Brighton councils, as well as members and representatives of the homelessness sector. The Alliance progressed a range of projects and it provided support as part of the successful campaign to waive Tasmania's housing debt. And the Alliance and the City also supported the Salvation Army and the Hobart City Mission to establish a safe night space pilot program to provide a bed and shelter for people sleeping rough in the city. The pilot, which the city provided the venue for the pilot free of charge, led to the state government deciding to provide funds to develop a more permanent program. The Council made a decision to become a signatory of the Welcoming Cities Network, which is a network of local governments around the country that are committed to everyone belonging and participating to multicultural cities, welcoming cities, and as part of the Welcoming Cities Network, we launched a Hobart Respects All campaign that called on bystanders to think about how they can support people in the community who are being targeted by racist behaviour. And this campaign was recently recognised with an award, a Tasmanian Human Rights Award. As part of enhancing livability and amenity in the city, the Hobart CBD became smoke-free in April. We designated the Hobart CBD bordered by Collins, Liverpool, Murray and Campbell Streets to join some of our public places in Hobart that are already smoke-free, including parks and playgrounds, outdoor dining areas and car parks. The Council continued to work with the Australian and Tasmanian governments alongside Clarence, Kingborough and Glenorchy councils to progress the Hobart City Deal, with the implementation plan being delivered in October 2019. The deal will guide and encourage development of Greater Hobart over the next 10 years, and it identifies key projects needing government support, such as improved public transport infrastructure, affordable housing and urban renewal. Whilst it is only in its first year of implementation, there have been some achievements across the 7 focus areas of the plan, including the $20.8 million commitment to new park and ride and extra bus services from Kingston, which will help reduce congestion in the CBD and on the southern outlet, we hope. In addition to the Hobart City deal, the councils also worked with the Tasmanian Government to collaboratively draft the Greater Hobart Act 2019, which was presented and passed by the Tasmanian Parliament in August 2019. This Act provides a framework to support collaborative decision-making between those 4 Greater Hobart Metro Councils and the State Government. In closing, we acknowledge the service of former elected member Alderman Tanya Dennison, who served on the council from 2014 to 2020. And I'd like to pass on our very sincere thanks to the residents, businesses and people of our city for your contribution, resilience and spirit of community in such a difficult time. I'd also like to thank the many volunteers in our community who spent hours making a positive contribution as part of the COVID-19 response. Many of those volunteers actually assist the council with our work and provide very valuable support. I'd like to do a special call out to the safety angels and all of the young volunteers that are helping us manage the Salamanca market in a COVID-safe way. It does take over 100 volunteers every day we run the market, so it's quite a remarkable contribution. So just to thank all of our volunteers, your efforts were critical to keep our community and many of our programs functioning. I'd also like to thank the General Manager, Nick Heath, his executive team and all of the City of Hobart staff for your commitment and your dedication, your very professional work in successfully navigating through what has been a very challenging year. As we reflect on a year that has been unlike any other and work towards recovery in 2020-2021 and for several more years, I would like to sign off my address with a very poignant and relevant extract from the community vision, which is the vision that was done in 2018. I think many of you may be aware of Hobart, a community vision for our island capital. So I'll just quote from that vision. Hobart's isolation and scale have required resilience. We know that future challenges will demand that we work hard and we work together. But we are our best selves in times of adversity and vulnerability. We are caring, helpful and supportive of everyone at all times, but especially when things get tough. We flourish in times of hardship. Thank you, everyone. So, the next step is to receive any written submissions from electors in relation to the annual report, but I note that there have been no formal written submissions received in relation to the annual report, but you may want to note that for next year that is something that members of the community can do to provide a written submission, and it could be considered here at an annual general meeting. So we'll now move on to questions from the community. I note that we have received questions from 2 members of the public for tonight's meeting, and I'll invite those individuals to ask their questions shortly. But if there's anyone who wishes to ask a question related to the annual report, then I'd ask you to come forward and use the microphone to ask your question. And if you could just state your name before you ask your question, it would be appreciated. Any questions? So just if you go up. Sorry, would you like to go up first? Oh, Kevin, and then your question, and then was there one over here?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have 3 questions. Do you wish them all concurrently or separately?
It depends if they're related to each other, but why don't you do them one at a time? We'll see what it's...
I refer to page 37 and it refers to a parking plan being developed. Can I ask what constitutes this parking plan, and will it consider the parking problems of the inner city caused by commuter parking?
Sorry, so 37, which point down is it, Kevin?
Hasn't got a number, so...
Sorry, do you mind just reading out exactly which one you're referring to?
Developing a parking plan.
Investigate the establishment of a parklets program. Okay, I think that might be one for Mr. Noy.
Thank you, Kevin, for that question. Yes, we, as part of this last financial year, we had an intention to explore the, I suppose, expansion of, the footpaths into some car parking spaces within the city to afford greater opportunities for dining and walking opportunities. And this is, I suppose, has occurred in other cities in response to the COVID pandemic. We've, and it's been very timely that you asked this question, because we've recently gained funding from the state government to undertake a pilot parklet program in Midtown of a grant funding of in the order of $80,000. And we rolled out some of those parklets this week to allow for greater dining opportunities for some of those businesses that would have been hard hit during the COVID period, lockdown.
Thank you. Kevin, did you want to ask your next question?
Certainly, I'm not sure that includes my question about parking in these inner suburbs. Perhaps I misheard.
So, Kevin, if you could, you talked about something on page 37. Would you like to... Mr. Carr, would you like to respond to Kevin's question?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin, for the question. So, Peter Carr, Director of City Innovation. In terms of parking, we are developing a parking policy at the moment, which is looking at a range of national and international standards and how we might be able to apply them to Hobart, and that will include how we are looking at not just the CBD, where parking has traditionally been focused for the city, but also looking at the knock-on effects of some of the inner city suburbs as well. So congestion is certainly a key point for us in making any policy changes, as is amenity for everybody, including the residents who may be impacted by suburban parking that is going on, but also those that are looking to make their way into the city. So it's going to cover a range of issues, and it's something that we'll have drafted this year.
Kevin, did you want to ask your next question?
My second question was
Kevin, just right into the microphone.
Respect to page 47 on the matter of community conversations. The general community appreciates the opportunity to converse with the City Council on a range of issues, so I'd like to understand what the present program is for those community conversations in the coming year.
I might ask Mr. Short to answer your question.
Thank you for your question, Kevin. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tim Short, the Deputy General Manager here at Council. In respect to community conversations, we did hold one pre-COVID at the Glebe. We reviewed how that went and had begun to make some changes to how we would like to run the community conversations. So community could get much more out of that event. And then, of course, COVID has happened, so we've put everything on pause. We're now working with Mr Noy's division. The proposed program for the coming year will be much more around traffic and local traffic plans. So that will be the program for this year. We have not identified the specific times for the specific suburbs at this stage, but that is very much our plan.
Kevin, your third question?
Yes, my final question is on a related subject. The process the council has going on called Hobart Your Say. I'd like to get comment from the appropriate person on how they consider that program to succeed or not succeed, and are there any ways it can be improved?
Mr Short, would you like to respond to that?
Lord Mayor, I might take that question on notice, if that's all right.
Okay, that's fine. So that's around the Your Say program and to what extent we're evaluating the success of it and ways it could be potentially improved. Great, thank you, Kevin. So I might ask, is there anyone else with a question? Yes. And sorry, if you can just introduce yourself. I forgot to ask Kevin to introduce himself. That was, just introduce yourself when you ask your question.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Karen Tantari, ASU, Australian Services Union. I represent the employees of Hobart City of Hobart. So I've got two questions in relation to the report. One, you won't be surprised, I've raised this before. This year's annual report from page 78 onwards details at least $15 million of spending on contracting out services which could be performed by city employees, such as cleaners, parks and gardens, labourers and road maintenance and consultancy services, such as project management. In a letter to the ASU dated 6th of January 2021, in response to the ASU's request over at least the last 2 years for job security for the city's employees, the General Manager stated that, and I quote, "At times like this, it is incumbent on all of us to maximise the ratepayer dollar and ensure we are providing the best possible value to our community. Knowing how the community feels about services such as public toilet cleaning being contracted out to one contractor, who takes their cut, then subcontracts to another contractor, who then subcontracts to an employment agency, leaving the ratepayer to pay for multiple layers of profit margin for private companies, how does the city justify expending such significant funds on outsourcing rather than providing secure, permanent employment at reasonable costs to the ratepayers for the workers undertaking the services?"
Thank you, Karen. I might ask the General Manager to respond.
Look, thank you for that question, Karen. Appreciate it. I don't walk away from one comment I made in that letter to you on the 6th of January, and I'll take the rest of the questions on notice.
Thank you. Question 2. The remuneration of senior employees is detailed on page 59 of the City of Hobart Annual Report. In previous annual reports, the previous year's remuneration bands have been notated alongside the current financial years, whereas this year the comparison is missing. That aside, it is clear from the report that there has been a significant remuneration increase given to the directors of City of Hobart again this year, with many of the directors moving up into higher remuneration bands in the report. The General Manager is now paid somewhere in the range of $380,000 to $400,000, and the city spent over $2.65 million on just 6 senior employees, whilst using a global pandemic to stand down over 100 employees without pay or JobKeeper, and employees having faced a wage freeze and no guarantee of job security. When employees went 6 months without a wage increase and only received their wage increase in January 2020 instead of July 2019, how is it that the senior employees' remuneration has increased so significantly for individual directors?
Thank you for that question, Karen. It's my decision as to what's published in the annual report in terms of senior salaries. The publication complies with the Local Government Act, and I'll take the rest of the stuff on notice.
Okay, another question? Yes, I've got Eric, your question on notice.
On pages 8 and 12 of
Sorry, Eric, would you mind just introducing yourself for everyone in the room?
Oh, sorry, Eric Pinkard from Mount Stewart. On pages 8 and 12 of the annual report, The Lord Mayor and the General Manager report that the Council had an operating deficit of $7.12 million. However, this includes an adjustment for grants of $2.028 million. We don't understand why this adjustment is made when there must be corresponding expenditure for the grants. Can somebody explain why that adjustment has been made?
Who would like to take that one?
Yeah, hello. Michael Grabbatch, Financial Operations Manager. I'm just looking at the note now that you would be referring to. So under the auditing guidelines, there's a number of grants that can be, specific things that can be included and excluded. Basically, it is based on what brings it back to what is a normal operations. So I'd have to take, if you wanted further information on that, I'd have to take it on notice. But does that sort of answer your question at all? Or?
Well, in the report itself, it says the loss for the year is $4.486 million, not $7.12 million. That's on page 93.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Then it goes on to say that the net result is a surplus of $266,730 million. So the council's not going broke.
No, well, the difference between the underlying result and the normal result is the normal result is including everything. So it's all expenditure, all revenue. So that there's nothing eliminated out of that. So yes, that would be, I guess, like a true result. However, so that councils can be compared equally across all the councils, there's a number of items which can be taken out or added back to bring the revenue back to what is classified as normal operations. So that's what the underlying result, in this case, yes, it is a deficit, at note 9 of the financial statements.
Okay.
Yep.
Have you got another question, Eric? Or?
Yes. On page 35 of the annual report, an initiative to improve pedestrian connections between Elizabeth Mall and Wellington Court has not been progressed. Has any progress been made this financial year?
Mr. Noy is going to take that one on.
Thank you. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Neil Noy, Director City Planning, and the simple answer to that is no, it hasn't been progressed at this stage.
Also, on page 35, another action initiative is for the Council to undertake consultation with the State Government and tourism stakeholder groups on the development of a tourism strategy for the City of Hobart. Has any progress been made on this since the end of the financial year? If not, when does Council expect an outcome?
Mr. Short.
The answer is no, we haven't, and that is directly related to COVID. The tourism industry essentially is on its knees, and so everything we knew about tourism got turned on its head as a result of COVID. So we now, I guess, have to re-establish what the parameters are, and we've not done that at this stage.
Eric, have you got one more, or...?
Yeah, another 4 or 5.
I might see if there's anyone else who'd like to have a go before... No? Okay, Eric, the floor's yours.
On page 37 of the annual report, reference is made to a Hobart design manual, which is to guide public place making initiatives. Can Council please elaborate on this?
Lord Mayor, I assume
yes,
you'd
Mr.
like
Noy, yes.
me to answer that. Yes, this is a a design manual that other jurisdictions have, I suppose, adopted for their own jurisdiction. It mainly deals with public spaces, streets, building facades and the like. So it sets out what is appropriate for various areas of the city. It talks about standards around paving, it talks about standards around lighting and the like, footpath width, seating requirements and the like. So it sets out for everyone, for the elected members, the public, to agree on, I suppose, as to what is appropriate for the specific setting that we're working in, and hopefully upgrading over time. So it's a common tool that other jurisdictions use, and we think it's appropriate to, I suppose, develop one and seek public input on it. Like a lot of things last year, funding was redirected for a lot of programs to, I suppose, shore up our bottom line, and a lot of these projects have been put on hold as a result of that. But we intend to move forward in future years to develop that guideline.
Thank you. Next question.
On page 37, also, another initiative to develop guidelines for outdoor dining infrastructure. It appears to us that this is shutting the stable door after the horse has bolted. When will these guidelines be available for public consultation?
Mr. Noy?
Yeah, we would hope in the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you.
Next question.
On page 43, what is meant by the initiative to develop a local food policy framework?
Would like to take that one on. Mr. Short?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. We do have outstanding notice of motion that Council adopted to explore local food policy for the City of Hobart, and we've not been able to action that yet, again because of COVID.
Next question.
Page 60 and 62 include references to rate remissions for carless properties. That's $425,984. And for Sultan Holdings Proprietary Limited, $402,579. And on page 62, Myer received a development assistance grant of $962,500. Was the Myer grant affected by COVID, and how long do these rate remissions and grants run for?
Thanks, Lord Mayor. I might take that question. The Myer grant was not affected by COVID, but has it now expired? So that contribution to Myers is now concluded. The other two that you refer to, Eric, have, I think, about 2 years to run. So they'll continue to be reported in the annual reports, and they'll probably generate the same questions, and I'll give the same answer. They are packages to assist the city at a time when it was on its knees, and I think the council has been fairly transparent in the way those arrangements have been portrayed in our annual report.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Further questions? Another question on notice, Mr. Corr. Yep.
Thank you. My name is Brian Corr. I'm the president of Hobart, not High Rise, but I'm asking this question as an individual and as a ratepayer. And I have to say it's the first time I've ever asked a question like this where I feel absolutely nervous. I refer to the annual report, page 51, Statement of Code of Conduct Complaints. Given that a number of these complaints relate to the use of social media by elected members. My question is in three parts. If possible, I'd like to ask the full three before I get any replies. Number one, are elected members bound by the social media policy dated the 18th of November 2019, either as part of the Aldermanic Code of Conduct or otherwise? Number two, what training has been given to elected members to ensure that they are aware of the contents of this social media policy? Now, Alderman Barakis allows nasty, personal, off-issue comments to be posted on his Facebook page. When asked to remove them, he replied, "As always, if you feel that any individual comments made by members of the public in the post are in breach of the code, I will be happy to take a look and consider of them." Note section 1.8 of the social media policy. It states, elected members are reminded that they are responsible for all content published on their social media accounts, whether this be posted by themselves or a third party. It is not my role as a ratepayer to monitor Alderman Barakis' social media content. In actual fact, I'd prefer not to have to look at his Facebook page at all. The abuse of me on his Facebook page in the last 48 hours is a continuation of similar abuse against others, including the Lord Mayor and other elected members. My question is, number three, how can I stop this abuse?
Okay, Mr. Kaur, I've got a couple of responses to some of the questions around the social media policy. So Part D of the elected member development and support policy provides guidelines for the use of social media by elected members. This policy was last adopted by the Council on 18th of November 2019, and the policy forms a position of the Council with respect to how the individual elected members utilise their own social media accounts. There are no penalties for individual elected members that fail to adhere to any parts of the policy, although elected members are expected to follow council policies, and failing to do so may give rise to other actions such as civil claims, code of conduct complaints or breaches of legislation. On the question of training, elected members have been made aware of the contents of the policy through their consideration of the matter, and the social media guidelines that form part of the policy was reviewed as part of all of our policies, reviewed and endorsed in November 2020. In addition, each elected member is asked to sign an annual attestation statement stating that they have been provided with a copy of all of our policies and that they will comply with all of our policies and its provisions. Further to the final question, which is primarily not about tonight's annual report, I'll have to take that question on notice.
And will you provide in writing what you've already said about the other points? I thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Can't see. No further questions? Okay. Well, so I'd like to call for a motion to adopt the 2019-20 City of Hobart Annual Report. So based on the presentation and the annual report, I'd like to invite a motion from Deputy Lord Mayor to adopt the City of Hobart Annual Report. And is there a seconder for the motion? Yes. Alderman Briscoe. So I'll now put that to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against say no. Thank you. I declare that motion carried. So that now concludes our annual general meeting. I'd like to thank you once again for attending, for your questions and your interest in the council's operations. and I wish you a very good night. Thanks for coming.